Chairman Pitts, members of the Appropriations Committee, thank you for allowing me to introduce Mr. Musk. I met him for the first time today, but have been working with his staff now for probably over a year, as have some of you. Chairman Davis and I are carrying some legislation that would assist this gentleman and his company in what they want to do for Texas. I'm going to let him really lay that out, but I just would ask you to listen to his testimony and what he wants to do for us in Texas, and how we can partner with him to revitalize our space industry. It is really a pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Elon Musk, who is the president and owner of SpaceX, and as well is Karen Shennewerk, I think I did that right, Sharon, who is his counsel and assistant. And you're going to hear some pretty exciting things about what can happen in Texas, as you've been hearing this morning as we were watching some of this from my office. But again, thank you for giving us this opportunity, and we appreciate the time and attention, and particularly when a lot of you all want to be at home on Friday with your family. So thank you all for allowing me to testify and to be part of this really important project that is something great for Texas. Musk?
Elon, I want to tell you, I was watching your recent launch to the space station and your successful launching and your successful docking, and I was very thrilled to see that.
Thank you.
You would introduce yourself and...
Absolutely. Well, Chairman Pitts and members of the committee, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be before you. We've actually had SpaceX operations in Texas for quite some time, in fact, from almost the beginning of the company. We have our rocket development facility near Waco in McGregor, and it's gone very well. And because in part because that's gone so well, has led us to think, well, we should probably have a launch site in Texas. People have been very welcoming, very supportive of our rocket developments for quite some time. In fact, we've got a couple hundred employees in Texas already at that facility. So just to talk a little bit about the history of SpaceX, we're about 10 years old. We're actually approaching 11 years old. We develop rockets and spacecraft, and have now, as you mentioned, completed our fifth flight of our Falcon 9 rocket, which is a very large rocket. It's sort of about a 1 million pound thrust level. To put that into perspective, it's about 4 times the thrust of a 747. And then we have our Dragon spacecraft, which has completed its fourth flight and its third docking with the International Space Station. So NASA selected SpaceX as the primary means of transferring cargo to and from the space station. And that's we've been able to execute that duty and complete all of the missions to date. NASA has also selected us to upgrade our system to carry astronauts. So as you may be aware, the United States currently is dependent on the Russians to transport astronauts to the space station, which is an unfortunate circumstance and something that needs to be corrected as soon as possible. Our system should be ready to transport astronauts in 2 to 3 years. We want to make sure that we've done everything possible to make the rocket as reliable as it can be, make the spacecraft as reliable as it can be, do many flights, iron out any issues before we have astronauts on board. But it's looking quite promising for the next 2 to 3 years to make that happen. And then we also intend to carry both astronauts for NASA and for other countries, as well as private citizens to space. And in the long term, our goal is actually to make dramatic improvements in the cost of space flight and to ultimately make it accessible to almost anyone that wants to go. And in the very long term, the reason I actually started the company was to advance space technology ultimately to the point where we can send people to Mars. I think that would be incredibly exciting, and it seems like that's kind of where we should have been going after the Apollo program. I just think it's it's a bit sad that we sent people to the moon in '69, and then we lost that ability. And then with the space shuttle, we could only send people to low Earth orbit. Now the space shuttle's not flying, and that's not a good path. And I don't think we want to tell our kids that the 1969 was our high watermark. I think that's a terrible thing. So the goal of SpaceX is to try to reverse that trend as much as we can, and I think we've made decent progress in that direction. Now, one of the things that we think is important along those lines is to establish a commercial orbital launch site. And just so everyone knows this would be the first commercial orbital launch site in the world. So there's Cape Canaveral in the U.S. and there's Vandenberg, there's Wallops, and there's a few other things, but those are government launch sites, and they have an important role to play. But it's also important that there be a commercial orbital spaceport, just as there are commercial airports. There's a logical role for Air Force airports, and there's a logical role for commercial airports, and the same applies to spaceports. And you may have heard some talk of spaceports before, or commercial spaceports before, but those are suborbital, essentially where you go up and you fall right down. And we're talking about something that's really the big leagues here. This would be kind of a commercial version of Cape Canaveral. So it would be an historical first in the world. It would be of very great significance both to the local economy as well as to the world, really. It's worth noting that Cape Canaveral or Cape Kennedy, that whole center within Florida, I'm told it's the largest tourist attraction in the state of Florida besides Disney World. And they have millions of visitors every year to Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy, because it's very exciting to watch a rocket launch. It's really one of the most exciting things you can possibly do, so I'd really recommend it. And anyway, that's what we really are thinking about establishing near Brownsville. We've worked a lot with the various federal and state regulatory agencies. It all seems to be progressing pretty well, and we're optimistic about making this work in Texas, in the Boca Chica area. So it's looking quite good. So any support that Texas can offer would obviously be helpful in that direction. We are looking at other potential launch locations, expanding on our activities in Florida is one, Georgia, Puerto Rico, and there are a few other possibilities. So it's not for sure that it would occur, but I would say Texas is probably our leading candidate right now.